So to talk about animation, we first talk about the 12 principles of animation. They are squash and stretch, anticipation, staging, straight ahead and pose to pose, follow through and overlapping, slow in and slow out, also known as easing, arcs, secondary action, timing, exaggeration, solid drawing, and appeal. Now, these were invented many, many years ago as the Disney animators, the 9 old men of Disney, created and refined the concepts of animation. So one thing about animation is that you can stretch and squash things. Hello. You can exaggerate actions and motions to make them appear more dynamic. So the squash and stretch technique is used to depict exaggerated animated motion. Make the motions larger than life rather than more swift, realistic, or sometimes unnoticed in passing. You see a lot of stretch happening here. In 3D, this kind of animation is usually done through rigging. We're able to stretch and squash our models. Anticipation, concept used to prepare the audience for an immediate action and make the action appear more realistic. So it's the build-up time before an animation takes place, the anticipation before a movement moves. A visual hint that is given to the viewer to let them know what's about to happen. Such as Donald Duck charging up his leg before he runs. Staging, the positioning of the characters in a scene for maximum emotional content and clear readability of actions. So we use staging in game design as well, what we're showing to our user at any given time. That could also be in traditional animation styles, like for cutscenes, where you're actually placing your camera in cinematic positions. It could also be the staging of your game. Your lead, as your player wanders through your level, you're arranging how things are being shown to the user. Staging also refers to silhouette, how clarity of silhouette makes actions easier to read. Such as these two examples, Jiminy Cricket. In this one, his silhouette is not as clear as the action he's performing. He could be checking his phone, he could be rolling a cigarette. Whereas in this first one, it's clear from his silhouette without seeing the details what he is doing. Straight ahead and pose to pose, two ways of animating. So straight ahead is animating in order without planning. You're literally going one frame to the next, one movement to the next. Stop motion animation is mostly straight ahead. You tend to have to do it that way because you're making a change one piece at a time. And 3D animation and stop motion animation are very similar in their process. You move from frame to frame and make a change and have that animate. So it's not as easily controlled as the pose to pose method where we set key positions. Straight ahead animation requires strict attention to maintaining of volumes and sizes that can result in very fluid looking movement. So yeah, things where generally with effects animation, if you're doing like handcrafted effects animation, fire or smoke, you do that straight ahead because it's hard to plot how that shape is going to form as you animate it. So something like this, you're literally drawing frame to frame to frame. You're not setting up your key poses. Pose to pose is a method of establishing key poses, key frames. So we have our key frames, we have our pose, we have our breakdowns. So we establish our key positions first, the key moments in the action first, and then going back to complete the breakdowns and in-betweens. In 2D, size, volumes, and proportions are controlled better this way, as is the action. In 3D, size and volume are easier to control because we have a 3D model with a volume. But we still, if we're doing something pose to pose, we still have to go through and refine the in-betweens. Follow through is the termination part of an action. It shows how one part leads organically to the next until the action is resolved. So the follow through of any extra pieces of clothing or hanging off extra items. So the action actually completes here of his fall to the ground. Then the follow through is the cape following through on that same action. Overlapping refers to the principle of not all parts of a character arrive at the same time. And it's a good principle for animation as well. Not everything happens at once. Things tend to happen out of sequence. So with characters, not all parts of the character arrive at the same time and can go past the point of arrival and settle back. So clothing, hair, if it's something like a prop that has some tassels on it, like a chest that has a little bit of carpet, those extra pieces will be overlapping and flowing with the motion of the action. So similar to follow through, this is just when it overlaps past the character. Slow in and slow out, also known as easing, and you'll see it referred to as easing in most software, or interpolation. Slow in means slowing down the speed of an action when reaching a main pose. Slow out means accelerating again upon leaving a main pose. So slow in from the start of an animation. We're coming into the animation, we're starting slow and moving faster. Slow out towards the end of the animation. We're getting slower and slower. So these are all individual frames of this pendulum, and you see they're closer together on the ends because they're slowing down on their swing. Slow in at the start. And then it slows down as it comes to the end of the action. That's our slow out. Timing, essentially. Timing and spacing. Arcs. All actions, with a few exceptions, such as the animation of a mechanical device, follow an arc or a slightly circular path. Especially true of the human figure and the action of animals, arcs give animation a more natural action and better flow. So the swing of someone's arms is an arc. Do the movement here of this squirrel as it goes down, down, and curving more up. Everything's traveling in an arc. Then we also have an example of the overlapping action. As it comes to a stop, the extra of its tail takes a few extra frames to settle back. But the whole thing is on an arc. Secondary action, additional animation added to give a little bit more character. Additional action in addition to a major action to show nuance with the main idea. Secondary action would be a character tapping his foot impatiently to a faster rhythm. So anything that is extraneous to the main action of the animation. Timing. Process of determining how long each drawing or position should be on screen based on the knowledge that 24 frames equal 1 second of screen time. In Blender, we can choose to animate on 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, or 60. I tend to animate everything on 24 frames per second and then figure out the timing later if I need to go up or down in frame rate. So, correct timing makes objects appear to abide by the laws of physics, represented by how many frames an animator assigns to a given action. So this is a walk cycle, again, in an arc. And you see we have our key positions in place. And then the speed of this animation, the speed of this walk will be how many frames we put in between those key frames. So this whole section takes 24 frames, and it's 1 second per step. 1, 2, 3. Pretty decent rhythm. If I increase that to 24 frames, it's 2 seconds per step. It's very slow. So the amount of frames you give something is how it affects the timing. And how you space out those frames will affect its movement. Exaggeration goes hand in hand with squash and stretch. Yeah, we just exaggerate things to breaking point in animation, sometimes much more cartoony than others. See, the hands are exploding, the eyes are exploding, and everything in this character is down. His ears are down, his face is down, his whiskers are down. Down. So everything's exaggerated downness. And then solid drawing doesn't really apply to 3D, but it's just about giving depth to your characters in 2D. It can be good when you're drawing your own concept designs. Try not to draw things flat, standing on a straight line. Give them a little bit of detail and a more interesting pose. Flat drawing, solid drawing. And the last thing is appeal. What's going to make your designs appealing to players and users? It's the visual quality that makes characters and objects attractive, interesting, stimulating. The character is not appealing, is not visually necessarily sympathetic. Villains or monsters can also be appealing. Important idea is that the viewer feels that the character is real and interesting. Okay. Oh yes, and then Walt Disney says, animation is explain whatever the mind of man can conceive. This facility makes it the most versatile and explicit means of communication yet devised for quick mass appreciation. A great quote for the ages. So let's look at animation in Blender. So just open up Blender and get started. Alright, so I've got my rectangle. Fantastic. Just going to add 2 more shapes to animate. I'll make a UV sphere. And I'll add a torus. I'll just give it some quick colors so I can differentiate them. Okay, so to animate anything in Blender, first we need to select the object we want to animate. Then we have our timeline just down along here along the bottom. So I was saying frames a lot in my introduction. How many frames in between keyframes? This is your indication of frames right here. By default, you get 250 in a Blender file, which at 24 frames per second is 10 seconds, 10.01 seconds. Your start frame and your end frame, you can increase your number of frames right here if you need more. But to start animating, we first need to set a keyframe to record a value on this object. So we want to animate its position, its location. I need to add a keyframe for location. So under keying, you can see that little plus, insert keyframe. And it'll probably bring you a big list of different properties. We're going to look for a location. And you can actually select and set that in the keying set, just have it ready to go. So you're just setting keyframes on location. Oh, just created a keyframe. That was what I created that in. So yeah, if I jump over to my animation window, I can see what I've actually just keyframed by setting that key. Hello. So by not selecting a keying set, it just gave me all of the object transforms. So location, rotation, and scale have all been recorded on this position. I'll go back to layout. So the way animation works in Blender is first you go to the frame. So I'm on the frame. You make the change, and then you insert the keyframe. So I want to insert a keyframe on, say, frame 30. First, go to the frame on the timeline here. Next, I want to make my change. So keyframe location, I'm going to change this guy's location. And third, insert the keyframe. And until you see that little yellow dot, there's no keyframe set. And the shortcut for inserting a keyframe is I. Insert keyframe. Oops. So go to the frame, make the change, insert the keyframe. And now I can press play, and it moves for 30 frames, and then it doesn't do anything else. Now, we just want to see our animation previewed again and again. There is a little preview button right here. So with this turned on, I can set a preview range. If I just want the first 30 frames, just set start and end. Start at 1, end at 30. It'll create a preview range for me. Now I can just preview my animation. So to do the same thing with the sphere, if I just want to add some animation to this, first select it and insert a keyframe. So number 1, got my object selected, go to the frame, make the change, insert the keyframe. So I don't want to make any change here. I just want to insert a keyframe. That little plus. And then I can go to the frame, say frame 30. This time I'll make a move and I'll scale it. Oh no, it's set to all 3. So yeah, what it's actually set, because we didn't set a keying set, is location, rotation, and scale on the X, Y, and Z. So this, and I'll explain this as well, this is your dope sheet. This is over in the animation view window. And that just breaks down each of the individual properties, whereas the timeline just gives you a top level. You just see that one keyframe. Anyway, because I haven't set a keyframe at this point, if I press play, it goes back to its initial. So the only recorded position is on frame 1. So it didn't record that move and that scale. In order to record it, I need to do my system, go to the frame, make the change, and then insert the keyframe. Go to the frame, make the change, insert the keyframe. if I just want to animate on one property, I can define my keying set. So for this torus, I'll say I just want it to spin. So then I can actually define my keying set in here. So by default, it's for what's available, or we can say it specifically location, rotation, scale, or a combo, location and rotation together, or what we got by leaving it blank, because the most common one covers everything, location, rotation, scale. But if I just want rotation, I just select rotation, insert a keying set or keyframe. I'll move to frame 30, make my change. So I'll rotate this. 1, 2, 3. Go to the frame, make the change, insert the keyframe. Mm. No, it's not recording the mesh position stuff. So if you make a change, it'll be that change, the newest version of the mesh. Yeah. So deforming the mesh, we need to use bones, armatures, rigs, or shape keys, kind of morphing between two shapes. Anyway, what makes this unique now, this one that's spinning, is that it doesn't have a location keyframe. So any of these other ones, if I try and move them away, say, oh, I want it to start here, because I haven't changed or updated the keyframe, it's going to snap back to where it was in the center. Move this one around, it's going to snap back to where it was because we have two location keyframes. This other one has no location keyframe, so I can move it anywhere, and it's not going to snap back to the center because it's only keyframed on its rotation. And it's the same thing with Unity's animation system. You'll find if you're trying to, sometimes I try to be a little bit cheeky. I don't want to code an elevator to move up and down. I animate the thing. Yeah, you'll find the keyframes you set for location in Unity are relative to its parent, relative to the world. So sometimes it can be better not to animate that property at all if you just want something to spin. So available is keyframes that are available if they're already keyframed on it. So if I have this set to available, if there's already keyframes in rotation, then it will add to rotation. So if I move it, and I add a keyframe, why am I looking at the projector? It still hasn't added one for location. It's added one for rotation because that's the only keyframe that is in there. But on that key, I can rotate it because there's rotation there. Hard to tell. Too many spins. Yeah, there we go. So ever so slightly weirder with the rotation. So back to the cube. I can go ahead and add more keyframes in the middle of this animation. Just go to the frame, make a change, and insert the keyframe. And it will create the necessary in-between, just creating that interpolation. It's also giving it a default kind of easing and timing value. So there are a couple of ways we can modify the timing and spacing between things. One is the classic animator way. We create more keyframes towards the end, the extreme, and we space them out. So there is kind of an ease going away. So we have more close to the start of an action and more frames close to the end of an action. And also I want to bring that action closer. So I wanted this to have, say, spend more time speeding up before it gets to the end of the animation. I simply add some frames close to the start and bring in those frames. I just bring it closer to its starting position. Make a change, insert a keyframe. Make a change, and I'm bringing it even closer to its start. Insert a keyframe with I. I'll let that go past there. And as it comes closer to the end, I'll push it even further. So where's my actual end? It's right there. Make a change, insert the keyframe. Insert the keyframe. There's a slight speed up and slow down. Slightly more snap to the action. And if we want to exaggerate that motion even further, I'll hide this one because it's just distracting. You can literally just start bunching these keyframes together. Literally grab them. We can select and move, click and drag to move them closer together. So the more tightly packed these are together, the more of a snap this thing is going to have. And then that central key is kind of holding the center of it. You can experiment as it's running. You see now there's a lot more time spent on this side before zipping forward in the last couple of frames. Or I can bring it way back here to frame 8. And now you see it kind of zips out at the start because there's more frames closer together. A lot of time to resolve this action. Yes, you're great at asking these questions that are like the next thing I'm going to do. Yes, there is. With it the other way. So this is, I quite like doing it this way, adding, you get a lot more control. But the other way of controlling the spacing between them, I should also say the way to delete keyframes, X to delete, the same as you delete anywhere else. Can we just get rid of these extra keyframes? Actually, do I need to? So the other way to control your spacing is through using the graph editor and changing the interpolation that way. So to see the graph editor, I'm going to need to make a new window. So I'm going to right click on my border down here. I haven't talked at week 6, we still been talking about how you can split these windows up. So you right click on the border, and I'm going to select a horizontal split for this area, and it just lets us split our windows into more windows. Horizontal split. And see, now I have 2 3D viewports. To bring them back together, right click, join areas, and you'll see this arrow going one way or the other. You can join back into one. So, yeah, right click, horizontal split, and then we're going to open so each one of these windows is defined by its icon. You see that's the timeline. This is the 3D viewport. Same as this is the 3D viewport. I'm just going to switch over in this new window to the graph editor. So here we can see our different keys, our keyframes for our different animated actions. I'm just going to select all. Actually, I'm going to full screen this with Control Space. Press A to select all, and then frame selected. No, no, this is Bezier curving. So linear is straight. Name all the interpolation styles. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tan, yeah. Sinusoidal. Custom Bezier. Yeah. So because I've only animated in the movement, I haven't animated in X Euler rotation or X scale, I'm just going to close the eyeball on those so I can see their strands. I think I just animated in the X and Y. Yeah, so the red and the green. So by default, it is Bezier curved, which means it's easing in and easing out ever so slightly. I'll just look at the X movement first. So what we have on screen here is our different keyframes, our 3 keys. And you can jump from key to key using this little button here, or use the arrow keys. Up arrow, down arrow. And this graph just represents the change in the value over time. So this is the change in the X value over time between our 3 keyframes. 1, 2, 3. So if you've ever used Adobe Illustrator or the pen tool, you'll know how to control these handles. Linear interpolation is a straight line. So if I make it straight, that just means it doesn't speed up or slow down. You can see I've straightened it out. It's going straight between those values. As it moves, you can see it's very robotically moving. No speeding up or slowing down. If I want to add speed up or slow down, it's about how we flatten into these values. So a straight line is going to speed it up. Like this is easing in, so it's slowly jumping up. And I can lengthen that to make it an extreme ease in. So much slower and then speeding up. And I want to ease out, so start fast and then slow down. Make that handle go the other way. So now it's going to explode out before pretty much stopping, before it hits that third keyframe. So it's going so quick to get to that next value. And if I go even further past that third keyframe, this third position, that means it's going to go past it and then come back. Overlapping action. So it goes past the point before slowing down. So ease in, ease out. Linear. Linear, straight line. And there are faster ways of doing this. Of course, in the key, we have our interpolation type. You can change the interpolation here. Shortcut is T. So constant, which is, it doesn't interpolate at all. It jumps frame to frame, useful for animating if you're blocking things out. If I select this one in the middle and then say constant, you see it just stays there and then very quickly bops. I say constant for the first one. Now there is no change. Bing, bing. Sometimes you just want things to teleport. T, the shortcut again. Linear, as I said, is a straight line. And I'm selecting each individual keyframe as I do this. And then Bezier is the default. So speed up and then slow down. But you can also investigate all of the other ones that you can use, such as cubic, quartic, exponential, circular. They're just more extreme versions of easing. And then dynamic effects like bounce, elastic, and back. That's elastic, so it kind of snaps very quickly. Bounce. And that's just in the X location. We haven't touched the Y location. Different set of keys. The other thing that's different about the graph editor versus the keyframe editor is that this is controlling the values of each individual property. So if I move this one down, it's going to add more to the Y. You see the movement's actually changed. So we are actually modifying the keyframe itself. You can even move that keyframe out. You see down on the timeline, it's moving as well. So I can reposition things as we see fit. Make it really extreme. Yeah. Yeah. In the middle of the curve, yeah. What do you want? I, right here. Yeah. Not subdivide because you're adding keyframes. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, your loop cut. Sure. But yeah, add keyframes with the I key in any of these windows. Okay, so first task of the day. A classic of animation, animating a bouncing ball in Blender. So download the ball bounce start file, and there's a tutorial here to follow. Change some. Yes, because what we could do is just add another mesh into this in edit mode. So like if this, yeah, this thing has something on it, if I wanted to put something on top of it or swap it out completely, I could add the mesh. Hmm. No. I mean, you could, there's a way of doing it. How could you do that? Square, circle, square, circle. You could do constant on and off switches and animated on and off. It's an interesting proposition, but no. I'm gonna say no. But yeah, if I wanted to add something like this monkey head on top, sure, no problem. And then that will animate along with the thing. And yeah, if we didn't want the cube anymore, we could just delete the cube. And now it's just the monkey head. So we can swap the mesh out, but having it swap frame by frame, I don't know about that. Yes. Well, I'd say you'd animate it on and off, like its visibility path, but then you'd very tediously have to do each frame. Anyway, that's alive. So for this task, there's a slightly different arrangement of the header. If you want to move that header back up to the top, just right click down here